Mai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadammayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavansha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitansha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Isopanisad mantras 1 to 3. I would like to thank Mother Urmila for these slides, which she shared with me. They're, as you can see, very, very professional, very well done. So I'll be using some of her slides. So this is Isopanisad mantras 1 through 3. And very quickly, I just like to do a little bit of recap from last time, just for continuity. So last time we talked about how the word Upanishad means upa, which means near, knee down, sad to sit. So Upanishad means to sit down near the spiritual master and to learn. So these days we are doing classes through Zoom, but the best is to be next to our spiritual master and to listen from them, near them, sitting next to them. But what to do? We are trying to make the best of a bad bargain in Kali Yuga. And then we talked about how there's 4 Vedas and how Sri Isopanishad is found in the Yajurveda. So this is just 18 verses of an entire Veda, but a very important Upanishad. So the Yajurveda is particularly instructions for performing sacrifices. So it gives knowledge about that. The Sri Isopanishad does many things, but 4 things in particular. It unlocks the secret to satisfaction and fulfillment. So how can we lead a satisfying life? This is what we will see today, is being discussed. How can we lead a satisfying life? It defines good and evil, what is good and what is evil. It reveals the Lord's mercy. And as we talked last time, this is a path philosophy. So it also invokes Krishna's mercy. It gives us a process by which, by practicing that process, and also by reading the scripture, we can invoke Krishna's mercy. So in all of these ways, the Sri Isopanishad, these are some of the themes that the Sri Isopanishad covers and tells us about. Srila Prabhupada tells us who is the author of the Isopanishad. He says, regarding your first question, who is the speaker of the Isopanisad? The speaker is the Vedas personified. In the Vedic age, a disciple heard from the spiritual master messages which were coming down in disciplic succession. So a disciple, whatever he learned from his bona fide spiritual master, would recite. The Vedic mantras are known as Shruti, to hear from authoritative source and then repeat it, chanting. So there's no question of who wrote it. It is said that no human being has compiled them. Later on, before the beginning of Kali Yuga, all Vedic mantras were written in books. Most of them were done by Srila Vyasadeva, Mahamuni, and his different disciples. So this is Shruti. I talked about this a lot last time, which means directly revealed by the Lord. This image is here because many scriptures say that the Vedas are the sound of Krishna's flute, that when Krishna played the flute, that knowledge was imparted to Lord Brahma, who heard the sound of his flute. This is also why the gopis in Vrindavan, they are considered to be the most knowledgeable, most learned devotees of the Lord, because they are hearing the sound of Krishna's flute. And among other things, the sound of Krishna's flute is the Vedas. This is also why the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra gives us knowledge, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Vidya Vadhu Jivanam. It gives us transcendental spiritual knowledge, because Prabhupada says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, in the Madhya Lila, I can tell you the verse number, but he says how the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra reveals us, or the pure chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the sound of Krishna's flute. So again, the holy name or the sound of Krishna's flute, when it's heard, then that gives us transcendental knowledge. So this is a Shabda Brahman, or the Vedas personified. The Mimamsa tradition also tells us that how the Vedas are the sound representation of the Lord. So therefore here it's being said Vedas personified, that Krishna does not speak the Vedas directly. He does not need to do that, but simply by the sound of his flute, or the Shabda Brahman, which is eternal. The Vedas themselves are eternal. The sound, this knowledge is eternal. That by itself is the source of the Vedas. And then Srila Prabhupada is saying that Vyasadeva and his disciples, they wrote down these Vedic scriptures. So also some other munis wrote them down, but primarily Vyasadeva, he wrote down the 4 Vedas, and Isopanisad is part of the Yajur Veda. So this Isopanisad is not simply an armchair philosophy book. It is a path philosophy. So it tries to give us the knowledge, and it teaches us how to change our actions so that our entire life and our lifestyle becomes changed. If we understand the greatness of the Lord, if we understand that Krishna is the creator, if we actually believe in that, if we have that knowledge, then we will act in that way. We will act to obey the laws of the creator. This is something universal you see in all the world's religions, that when they're God-fearing, then they try to act by the 10 commandments. So belief changes our actions, or theoretically speaking, it should change our activities. If we know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and if we know that the law of karma is his own laws, then we will not engage in sinful activities, because we will be fearful of the reaction of those activities. But then the Isopanisad goes a step further, and he says that not only is God the creator, but if we have the knowledge that Krishna is the supreme enjoyer, the enjoyer of everything in this world, not just that he creates the world, but he enjoys all the foods in this world, all the music, all the dance, everything is meant for Krishna's enjoyment, then our actions change, where we try to act in a way to serve him out of love. And when we do this, then our whole lifestyle changes. So the Isopanishad is actually a very basic book, but it's a very powerful book. It can lead us, if we deeply understand its message, it can change our life, right? It can change our entire life. All revealed scriptures stress the purification of our beliefs and actions by giving us spiritual knowledge and practices to follow. Judaism is also very much like this. So many rules they give as a way to purify a person's existence and change a person's actions. By studying and realizing this knowledge and following these practices, we can make a genuine spiritual advancement. So in some ways, the Isopanishad should be covered in the beginning. It's actually a very straightforward book that is speaking about the principles of spiritual life, basic principles of spiritual life. But it's also one of those summary books that in 18 verses, it takes us from the basic understanding all the way to realization of the Supreme Person. So it's also a nice kind of recap or summary of the Bhagavad Gita and Nectar of Devotion. So now these first three verses, text 1, the invocation, text 1 and 2, this is the flow. This is the how they progress forward. The invocation gives us the knowledge that the Supreme Lord is fully complete in his three features, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. And we are complete when we are dovetailed with him or connected with him. So the invocation is giving knowledge or sambandha gyan, that the Lord is complete and we are all part of him. Text 1 is giving us the process, the practical application of that knowledge. If we know that Krishna is the complete whole and we are all part and parcel of him, we are part of him, then we should only accept our own quota and engage in the Lord's service. As we will see, this is text 1. And then text 2 says that if we act in that consciousness and with this knowledge, if we act in the knowledge of the invocation and we act according to this knowledge as in text 1, then the result is that we get everlasting life, or we come closer to Krishna and get eternal life. So in this invocation, text 1 and text 2, there's Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayoja. So the first thing that Prabhupada actually talks about, he mentions this in text 1 and also in the introduction, that we have to realize that there are 4 defects that all of us have. This is a very important point that is emphasized in the Isopanishad. And this is why we need Shruti Gyan. This is why we need the knowledge of the Vedas. This is why we need the knowledge of Shabda, and Pratyaksha and Anuman are not good enough, meaning sense perception and logical reasoning will still be defective because logical reasoning is dependent on sense perception. Our logic is based upon what we see, and our senses are defective. Also, our capacity to reason is also defective. So what are these 4 defects? The first one is to commit mistakes. We are all prone to committing mistakes. To err is human. Right? Prabhupada says this, to err is human. And then he actually adds another part to it, which is not here, but it's interesting. He says, to err is human, to forgive is divine. Right? So we will all commit mistakes. Every one of us commits mistakes. And so that is human. Of course, we have to try to avoid our mistakes, but mistakes will still be made. And if we can forgive one another's mistakes, then that is divine. But this is the first defect. 2, to be an illusion or to accept what is not. So to be illusioned or being in illusion is another defect that everyone has in this material world. Seeing a rope to be a snake. This is an example of illusion. Also, the next one, which is 3, to have imperfect senses. Our senses are imperfect. They're so imperfect that even we cannot see our own hand in darkness, Prabhupada says. When it is dark, we can't even see our own hand. This is how imperfect our senses are. In the spiritual world, these imperfections are not there. And number 4 is to be cheated or to cheat. Our defect is that we have the cheating propensity. And these are 4 distinct things. That one is we make mistakes. Second is we accept something for that which is not. We misunderstand things. We misunderstand people. We misunderstand situations. Third is that we have imperfect senses. We misunderstand partly because our senses are not imperfect. Or even if we're not misunderstanding, we're simply just not understanding because our senses are imperfect. And the 4th one is the tendency to cheat. And this is such a universal tendency. Everywhere, this whole world is the cheater and the cheated. Someone is taking advantage and the other person is being taken advantage of. Someone is, successfully cheating another person is being cheated. The whole material life is about this cheating propensity. We are trying to cheat others to advance ourselves. And we can realize this transcendental knowledge, therefore, only by Shabda Pramana. These 3 Pramanas are there. We can only realize the truth by Shabda Pramana, not by Pratyaksha Anuman alone, because of these imperfections. So this is called epistemology. And in every philosophy, they begin by saying, how do we gain knowledge? How do we get to know things? And many philosophers like Descartes, they said pure reason. We get to know things by pure reason, not by sense perception, because they understand that sense perception is flawed, but by pure reason. But here Prabhupada is giving us a very logical reason as to why, for ultimate knowledge, we need to depend on a higher authority. And he's saying that not that we have to accept that by faith, but because of these 4 things, things that everyone has to admit are true. We have imperfect senses. Even if our senses are perfect, we have the tendency to cheat, or we will commit mistakes. So both our sense perception and our logical capacities are obviously flawed. So if they are flawed, then we have to accept Shabda Brahman, Shabda Pramana. We have to accept the knowledge of the Vedas. At the same time, Srila Jiva Goswami, Madhvacharya and Ramanujacharya, they do make a very good point where they say that even Shabda Pramana is heard through the senses, through our ears, and it is understood through Anumana or logic. So while we don't get that transcendental spiritual knowledge through Pratyaksha or Anuman, because it is beyond us, we can't get that. But still, we have to receive that through our senses and through logic. And thus they say that spiritual knowledge, the acceptance of spiritual knowledge, the retention of spiritual knowledge is actually a combination of all 3. We have to use all 3 to gain spiritual knowledge. A very, very important point here. So we depend completely on scripture. We cannot get knowledge about Krishna without Shabda Pramana, without this revelation, the Vedas and the scriptures. But at the same time, we cannot say we cannot make the claim that only Shabda, only the Vedas I will gain knowledge from, and I will blindly accept things, because we are gaining knowledge through our senses and through our logic. So even the scriptures we have to understand through our senses and through logic. Like one devotee recently, this is a very practical point. He was saying, I was, out of good intent, but he was saying that only Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee. Only Srila Prabhupada in our movement, only Prabhupada is, completely perfect in all ways. All other pure devotees in our movement, they're pure devotees, but they're not completely perfect like Srila Prabhupada. There's a problem with that statement. There's a big problem with that statement. What is the problem with that statement? Who can say?
When they say that, they're undermining what Prabhupada said, because he said all his sannyasi disciples are pure devotee, and they also undermine Prabhupada's ability to make pure devotees.
A nice comment, a very nice point. I like the second point, especially that they are undermining Prabhupada's ability to make pure devotees. But this devotee was not disagreeing that there's other pure devotees. His thing was about perfection, that only Prabhupada is perfect. And then regarding your first point, Prabhupada actually never said that all of his sannyasi disciples are perfect. And I think you were just meaning in terms of advanced devotees. To my knowledge, he never specifically said that all of his sannyasi disciples are perfect, because many of them even have fallen down. Not many, but some have fallen down. Prabhupada said that many of his disciples were pure devotees, and in some place he says they're all pure devotees, because eventually they will all become pure devotees. And so therefore, since they were as good as pure devotees. But certainly Prabhupada said that many of them were already pure devotees. So yes, so that's just a slight point there, that most of his sannyasi disciples, I would say many are pure devotees. But Prabhupada didn't mention specifically in terms of sannyas or not. That is yes.
Yes, so I was just thinking, if you accept that statement, then basically you're saying that this process does not work. There was just one Srila Prabhupada, and everyone else can become a pure devotee, but you can't reach perfection, which is not what Krishna consciousness is, because it can also make us perfect if we follow in the footsteps of our acharyas.
Yes, very nice point. Very nice point. That, well, then we are undermining the process, right? If the process can make us perfect, Prabhupada actually in one place says that all of you should become like me. Of course, out of humility, we will never even think, and factually so, that we can, become like him. But Prabhupada said that this is the goal of the process, is to become like him, to become eternally liberated souls one day. So this is undermining the process.
Also, maybe the disciplic chain will be broken then?
Maybe. Actually, yes, it can be broken then. It will be. But also in the Nectar of Instruction, in one verse that we read, Prabhupada says how even a Madhyamadikari can become a spiritual master. And he says even a Kanishtadikari, but he says one must be very careful to accept a Kanishtadikari as one's spiritual master. Ideally speaking, Uttamadikari devotee should be a spiritual master, but Prabhupada says that a Madhyamadikari can be a spiritual master, and many of our gurus in ISKCON openly say that I am a Madhyamadikari. And whether they're saying it out of humility or they're saying it because that's actually the case, we don't know. But yes, the process of parampara is also being undermined. That's, I think, your point. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. The problem with the statement is it's actually perceived through our material senses. We cannot really perceive a person's spiritual advancement simply by seeing his external activities. Like you mentioned, it's through it's Shabda Brahman doesn't really descend by somebody's external activities. So unless and until a person really hears to a person and his realizations, we really do not know the potency of that particular devotee.
Yes, this is also this is a very nice answer. That the problem with this statement is that in order to recognize a pure devotee, or no, in order to make that statement, one has to be a pure devotee oneself. One has to be a pure devotee oneself in order to know who is a pure devotee or who is not a pure devotee. And so the statement that only Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee or only Srila Prabhupada is perfect, no one else is, essentially what that statement is saying is that only Srila Prabhupada and I am a pure devotee. Because the only way that I can have the authority to make that statement that all the other devotees that I'm seeing are not pure is if I'm a pure devotee, right? So, I mean, how do I know? Maybe the pujari in the Mayapur temple is a pure devotee of the Lord, and they're doing that service for the Lord. How do we know that? If our own senses are imperfect, then it is possible that Prabhupada is the only pure devotee that ever lived. But how can I make that statement that this is the case unless I feel that my own senses are perfect? Unless I feel that I have all the knowledge, equal to Prabhupada. Secondly, the reason why that's imperfect, and this is why I was mentioning this, is that by saying that only Srila Prabhupada's instructions are perfect and therefore we should only follow his instructions, and that our own spiritual master's instructions are not worthwhile for us or not to be seriously taken, it's saying that only I can understand what Srila Prabhupada is saying. It's actually, although not, it's a subtle assumption that statement is making. Because virtually all the devotees in ISKCON, especially the advanced devotees, will say that I am following Srila Prabhupada. The goal of my life, my whole spiritual practice is about following Srila Prabhupada and taking guidance from him. Now, when we follow Srila Prabhupada, we have differences of opinion in our following of Srila Prabhupada. Some people say that, no, this is what Srila Prabhupada taught. Others say, no, that this is what Srila Prabhupada emphasized the most. Others say, no, this is what Srila Prabhupada emphasized the most. Some things are obvious to all of us, but there's also some differences of opinion. So if Srila Prabhupada is like Shabda Brahman, his writing, Prabhupada said that when he was writing, Krishna was directly telling him what to write. So it is Shruti. According to us, for us, Prabhupada's writing, his purports are Shruti. But what Ramanujacharya and Madhvacharya is saying, that even that Shruti is understood in different ways. And we have to understand it in different ways. We have to interpret it in different ways. So if it's understood and interpreted in different ways, that means we have to, we are using Pratyaksha and Anuma. And this is, we have a Shastrik Advisory Committee in ISKCON, and this is a big topic which they dealt with for a long time. It's called hermeneutics, or the science of interpretation. So we all follow Srila Prabhupada, but what about the case when we understand or read Srila Prabhupada differently, or especially so when Srila Prabhupada himself says different things at different times? So there's many examples. I don't want to get too much into this, where Prabhupada does say one thing in one place and another thing in another place. So how do we make sense of it? It is Shabda Brahman. It is perfect. Both things must be perfect, but to practically apply them, it would be contradictory to do both things. So these are places where we need to use Anuman and Pratyaksha. We have to interpret. We have to use our own intelligence to see that, no, this is the main message of Srila Prabhupada. This was a circumstantial message. Prabhupada says this due to circumstance, or in this circumstance, this is true. In another circumstance, this is true. And so we have to recognize, and we have to be humble in that way, to know that there's not just one way, only one way that to understand Srila Prabhupada, and that is our way of understanding. No, we oftentimes, even the great souls, they disagree in their specific understanding on certain points, and so by saying that only Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee and we should only follow him, we are essentially saying that you should only follow the way that I am reading Srila Prabhupada, right? That he's a pure devotee, we should only follow him. But what does it mean to follow him? Even following Srila Prabhupada means following what our spiritual masters, what the advanced devotees around us are saying that Srila Prabhupada is saying. Following Srila Prabhupada means that we are following his instructions, but to understand his instructions, even to understand his instructions, we need help and we need guidance. And if we feel that we don't need anyone else's guidance, that means we feel that that our understanding of Prabhupada is the final word, and that may not be true. We may misunderstand Prabhupada. So this is epistemology, very important. And in text 1 of the Isopanisad, Prabhupada talks about these 3 methods of gaining knowledge. He mentions how the ultimate source is Shabda Brahman. We must hear from the spiritual master. We must hear from the Vedic scriptures. And Pratyaksha and Anuman assist us, or are tools in understanding Shabda Brahman. And in also choosing the correct Shabda. There are also so many scriptures. There's the Shiva Puran, there's the Devi Puran. And how do we decide which Shabda Brahman to use? Well, we decide based upon Pratyaksha and Anuman. There's so many gurus. How do we decide on one guru? We do it based upon our own logic and our own perception. So therefore, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya say that actually the ultimate way of gaining knowledge, the ultimate, you could say, mechanisms are these. They should not be undermined. We have to use our intelligence in every situation. Prabhupada says, never give up your common sense. And while using these Pratyaksha Anuman, we take shelter to gain knowledge of things that are beyond us. So an example of this may be that like we cannot run 90 miles an hour. So therefore, we use the shelter of the car to do that. But ultimately, it is our foot that's running, because it's the foot that's pressing the gas pedal. So without the car, we can never reach that speed. Without Shabda Brahman, we can never reach those realizations. But it is still Pratyaksha Anuman that will lead us to the correct and help us in understanding the correct Shabda Brahman. And it's also a circular thing that then the more Shabda Brahman we get, the more our Pratyaksha and Anuman become purified, by which we can understand, and furthermore, which Shabda Brahman to take shelter of. So very important point. I therefore spent a lot of time on this point. So now I will move to text 1. We will read the text. There's only some few points in Isopanisad, but these points that take a lot of time. So they're very deep points. And it seems like all of you are enjoying it. So it's good that we are spending time on this. Now, mantra 1. Ishavashyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktvena bhunjita magdha kashyasvidhanam. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. Once again, everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota, and one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong. So this is a very practical verse for practicing devotees. Ishavashyam. This is the Ishavashyam spirit. We should work in the spirit that the Lord is the controller and owner of everything. Can someone read the text on the top? Again, that bar is there. I don't know how to remove it.
Mantra 1, is that what Prabhuji you are saying?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Mantra 1 reveals our practice of accepting only our quota and engaging in the Lord's service. Mantra 1 simply states that everything belongs to Lord, and so we should accept only as much as He has given for our quota. We need to understand that without the material ingredients which the Lord has provided, we cannot produce anything on our own. Prabhupada states, but for the Lord, no one is the proprietor of anything. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes. So in this mantra 1, Prabhupada covers the 3 ways of gaining knowledge, and he covers the four imperfections that a human being has, which are connected to the discussion of how we gain this knowledge. So what we were covering until now is the first part of the purport. Now the second part is dedicated to the actual verse, which is talking about this, the entire, the rest of this part, that the Lord is the proprietor and owner of everything. And because the Lord is a proprietor and owner of everything, because he is Purnam, he is complete. Therefore, given that knowledge that we are getting through Shabda Brahman, once we have this knowledge through Shabda Brahman, therefore we, being part and parcel of the Lord, should accept that which is our quota. And this is because the Lord is the proprietor and possessor of everything. So Prabhupada, in this regard, he has a very extensive discussion on capitalism and communism. And this is Prabhupada's political commentary from the Isopanisad, because the Isopanisad is relevant to the entire society, and Prabhupada is showing that how these teachings are so valuable that the entire society, everything, all the problems in the world can be solved as a result of these teachings. And what is the first teaching? The consciousness that everything belongs to the Lord. I don't possess anything. And Prabhupada starts out by telling us that how people are so foolish that they claim their proprietorship over certain lands that never belong to them. You know, America, just, you know, a few hundred years ago was occupied by a completely different civilization, completely different society. And now all of us so proudly we say that, you know, this is America, this is our land, and keep the immigrants out. Prabhupada says this is the mentality of a dog. You know, he goes and urinates on his area, on his boundaries. And then if anyone comes inside that boundary, then he barks. As though now that all of a sudden the dog has urinated, that all of a sudden that land belongs to him. The dog has urinated, and so now all of a sudden that land, that piece of property belongs to the dog. Here, when we moved to Naperville, which is near Chicago, then when we came in our home, you know, we moved here, so we moved into our home here. Then when we were looking at the home, we didn't realize it. They had, everything was very nice. But when we actually moved in, then there was this very strong smell, intense smell of dog urine. And when we actually moved in, we went into every room, and every single room, including the closets, especially the closets actually, were just stinking of dog urine. And then we could understand, and we actually, the previous person, he lied to us because we asked him, do you have any pets? And he said, no pets. Then we realized that this person had a dog. And the nature of a dog is that eventually, in whichever house they live, they will go and, claim their territory. And so we got the carpet shampooed. And when we got the carpet shampooed, the smell got worse because it just pulled the dog urine out. We didn't know that. We thought that if we get it cleaned, maybe, it'll get cleaned, the smell will go away. But then the person, after shampooing it, he actually told us, no, actually, if you shampoo it, it gets worse. So, thank you for telling us afterwards. And it was true, it got worse. Why? Because actually the urine goes through the carpet and it goes down into the wood. So then they had to remove all the carpet, and then there were stains on the wood, and then they had to spray over those stains, paint over them, so that the dog urine smell does not come up. This is the way to cover the smell, so to say. It doesn't come up. And then finally, after they painted over it, and then they put the carpet, painted over the wood, put the carpet, then the smell went away. This is how powerful their mark is. So Prabhupada says that this is the mentality of the capitalists, that they come to a place and they make a mess there, and they say that this is my land, this is my place, and all of a sudden it's my land. But actually Krishna is the proprietor of everything. Everything belongs to him. And in that way, Prabhupada says we are communist, because we don't believe that you earn or you get what you feel you earn. Nothing belongs to us. Everything belongs to a higher power. But we are not material communists, that now nothing belongs to us and it all belongs to some political leaders. No, everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. And that is spiritual communism. So everything belongs to the Lord, not to us or the political leaders. And that is perfect government. Carrying this responsibility of recognizing the authority of the Lord, human beings are meant to offer everything in the Lord's service for his enjoyment. By limiting ourselves to only our material necessities, we gradually detach ourselves from material activities. By first offering everything we have to the Lord, we gradually become attached to spiritual activities by partaking in his enjoyment. So this consciousness should lead us to accepting only that which is our quota, which means that we only accept whatever we need, limiting ourselves to our material necessities. And when we do that, then we can offer everything we have to the Lord. Otherwise, we will start becoming enjoyers ourselves. We will have more than what we need, which means that we are offering things not to the Lord, but to ourselves. And a major discussion in this is then what is our quota? So then people say, this verse is saying, devotees' first question that they have is, this verse is saying we should only accept that which is our quota. But then what is our quota? And Prabhupada now explains this. The root of sin is deliberate disobedience to the laws of nature through disregarding the proprietorship of the Lord. Disobeying the laws of nature or the order of the Lord brings ruin to a human being. Conversely, one who is sober, who knows the laws of nature, and who is not influenced by unnecessary attachment or aversion, is sure to be recognized by the Lord and thus become eligible to go back to Godhead, back to the eternal home. So first and foremost, accepting more than our quota means performing sinful activities. And actually in the next verse, Prabhupada makes this clear. He further emphasizes this point. Performing sinful activities is accepting. What is a sinful activity? A sinful activity is accepting something that is more than our quota. And therefore, Krishna says, therefore we don't perform sinful activities. Because Krishna says, don't perform sinful activities because we are then taking something from someone else. We're taking advantage of someone else and thus getting more than our quota. And that's why sin is what sin is. It's closely related. To illustrate this, Prabhupada gives the example of eating food. And he describes how this is why we are vegetarians. This is why we believe that eating meat is sinful. Because we all need to eat. It is our birthright. It is part of our quota to eat food. Otherwise, we cannot live. We must accept our quota. But if we eat in such a way that it ruins the life of another being, then that is accepting more than our quota. And vegetarianism, therefore, is good, and meat eating is called sinful or it's bad. When we eat meat, we are destroying the life of an animal. When we eat meat, now so many studies, and it was part of Time magazine's, I think last issue or 2 issues ago, it was their headline, that they had a huge article on this, that in order to bring about climate change, and these are not devotees writing, just people in general, it's so nice, there's an awakening. They're saying, if you want to be environmentally friendly, the first thing you need to do is give up your steak. The most environmentally polluting thing, the thing that is causing the greatest climate change. It's burning the entire world. Imagine, this is karma in action, you see. It's actually raising the heat, which is melting the glaciers, which will finish the rivers. It's actually burning the entire world, is the sin of killing animals, particularly cows. There's something about cows and cow slaughter. It produces the most amount of greenhouse gases, which lead to the destruction of the ozone layer, which leads to the increase in the temperature, and it's destroying the world. So people say, oh, we should be, environmentally conscious, and we should be this conscious. Absolutely, we should be true. We should, because this material world is Krishna's energy. But the fact is that if every person in this world becomes a devotee, all of our problems in this world get solved. So first and foremost, we all need to become devotees and encourage others to be devotees, because we see by becoming a devotee, we will give up meat eating. And by giving up meat eating, our environmental problems will be solved. Most of them, at least. About 70 to 80% of them will be solved just by giving up meat. And then if we become a good devotee, Krishna says, live off the land and the cows, lead a simple life, simple living and high thinking, accept only that which is your quota, then we'll also give up our attachment to all these plastic containers, to factories, because factories, plastic containers by definition means accepting more than what is our quota. So if we live our lives by the laws of nature, rather than going against the laws of nature, we give up unnecessary attachment, we become attached to the Lord, and we go back home, back to Godhead. So giving up meat eating, you might be wondering, why is Prabhupada in this verse all of a sudden talking about vegetarianism? And when he talks about it, actually, it's not so obvious that he's connecting these points, but this is the reason why. The very definition of good and evil is that evil is accepting more than our quota. That is performing sinful activities. The very definition of sin is accepting more than quota can be illicit sex. We all have the right to have relationships and even to enjoy kama, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, but not in a sinful way. We have the quota, the right of having one responsible relationship. And then Krishna says, it is yajna, in fact, it is sacrifice. Similarly, we have the quota of in terms of money and wealth. We have a certain quota to earn. But then if we don't utilize that wealth in Krishna's service or for the benefit of others, then again, it becomes binding, it becomes sinful when we waste that money. So that's mantra 1. Now we are on to mantra 2. As you'll see, these mantras will go more quickly because there's a few main points in each mantra and we'll be covering them. Mantra 2, Kuravani veha karmani jijive shechatam sama evam tvai nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. One may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way. For that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma. There is no alternative to this way for man. Once again, one may aspire to live for hundreds of years if he continuously goes on working in that way. For that sort of work will not bind him to the law of karma. There is no alternative to this way for man. So as a result of this is the natural result of the previous verse, that if we work in the Isha Vashya consciousness, that the Lord is the enjoyer and maintainer of everything, and I should only accept my quota, then one can go on and live for hundreds of years. Now, no one lives for hundreds of years, even if they have a super healthy life. So what this means is that one gets eternal life. But even in this life, one can have a very long life. Why? Because if one's accepting only one's quota, one is not overeating, or one is not eating meat, which is a source of so many diseases, or one is not drinking or smoking, which is the cause of so many diseases, or one is not performing illicit sex, which again is the cause of so many diseases. One is not gambling, which is the cause of so many suicides, or depression, or anxiety. So one can live a long and healthy life by living by the laws of God, simply because that lifestyle is more compatible with who we are and our own health, and also because then we don't get bad karma. Ramanujacharya says that disease in general, not in the case of devotees, but disease is a result of bad karma. So we will have a more healthy life. We will have a more happier life if we're not getting bad karma. If we don't perform sinful activities, we get good karma, or we get spiritual benefit from spiritual bhakti. We don't get bad karma. And that karma then doesn't bind us to this world. Again, mantra 2, therefore, is going to next slide. It's going to talk about big karma, the things that bind us to this world, and they really make us suffer. So if we don't do the bad things, we solve all the problems in one shot. If we become devotees ourselves and we make others into devotees, therefore the devotee is always meditating on how we can make others into devotees, because that is actually the way to make them happy and to solve not just one problem in this world, but all the problems in this world. This process is so beautiful because it gives us a method by which we can solve all the problems. You know, we all have our pet problem that we really feel disturbed by. But what about the other problems? And so the scriptures, Krishna, Prabhupada, they're giving us a solution by which we can solve all the problems. They're giving us a process by which we solve every problem. And that is by working in the Ishavasya conception, working for the Lord, working in a way that is not sinful, and in this way becoming free from karma, which will free us from the vices of this world. It reveals, mantra 2 reveals the reward of such practice. Mantra 2 assures us of everlasting life by working in this way. Let's go back home, back to God and to Krishna. So Prabhupada therefore describes, although we are by nature eternal parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, we are suffering repeated birth and death due to transgressing these laws of nature. There are three ways in which we can work in relation to the laws of nature. And we cover this in the Bhagavad Gita. So if you remember that, this is review for you. Karma means pious or scriptural duties for material elevation. So karma also refers to the law of karma, but in this context, karma has a different use and meaning. Karma here means this is activity. Karma here simply means the literal definition, meaning of the word karma in the dictionary. Karma means action. So karma in this context means actions that are good. They're not for Krishna necessarily. They're not devotional action, but they're good actions. I help a blind person cross the street. I help an old lady cross the street. This is karma. Then you have vikarma, which is impious or sinful acts. This is, let's go to the bar. Let's go to the dance club. Let's go to McDonald's and have a hamburger. This is vikarma, impious or sinful activities. And then the third one is akarma, which is activities which are for the Lord, devotional activities, Krishna consciousness, serving the Lord. So wonderful. So right now we are not pure devotees. And so we have desires. At least I do. I'm not sure if any of you do or not. I was warned that by many devotees that once you start teaching Bhakti Shastri, all your students very quickly become pure devotees. So some of you, it may not be relevant for you, but some of us have desires. We still have material desires. So we are not able to engage in akarma or the service of the Lord continuously. So in such a situation, what are we supposed to do? What we're supposed to do is engage in karma. We will still have those desires, we'll still engage in material activities, but we must then at least engage on the level of karma, where we're doing those activities, but we're doing it in a pious way, or rather we are doing regulated, we're enjoying material life in a regulated way. What we should never do, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur makes this point, is that we have so many desires, but never act sinfully. We should never allow ourselves to go to the point of vikarma. See, as devotees, when we have desires, we will need to fulfill them, we're driven by them, then we should find a regulated way of fulfilling that desire. We should find a regulated way of doing it. But we should never go to the platform of vikarma. So some devotees, this is a practical example, who are from Bengal, they get cravings to eat fish. A few devotees from Bengal have told me this, because Bengalis, they grow up eating fish. It's like vegetable for them. They're oceanside. They get this intense craving to the point that some devotees said that like literally they'd eat fish again. There's even some examples of devotees in our history of our Gaudiya Vaishnava movement in Bengal who would still eat fish. They're devotees, but they would still eat fish. So we may have that very deep desire. So then we should find the point is we should give up that desire, right? But we should find protein fish, or you could say artificial fish, and fulfill that desire if we have to, but in a regulated way. Not kill the fish, but find a fish replacement and fulfill that desire. Or we have a desire to enjoy our senses, our lust is disturbing us. Then we can get married. We can, go into household life. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, never impious or sinful acts. So this verse is a reminder on this point, that if we want to lead a healthy, happy life, which all of us want, if we want good fortune to come to us, then perform, enjoy life, but never do sinful acts. Give up that. Find ways of enjoying that are good. This is the point, right? I mean, as devotees, we say, give up the mood of enjoyment, just serve the Lord. By loving Krishna, we'll be the happiest person. But the reality is, let's just be real, at times that won't work for us. We will say, no, I have to get out of the temple and I have to, I have to go. So if we have the craving to travel, then go to the temples, visit the temples. But we're saying, no, I want to get away from the temples. Then we say, okay, then go and visit the national parks, connect with nature. It's still enjoyment, but it's pious. But don't go to Las Vegas. Don't put yourself there. Don't experiment with that. Let me go to Las Vegas. I'm just going there for a visit to see. And, there's even a temple there now. Let me go there. No, we shouldn't go to Las Vegas, period. Many devotees went for the temple opening in Las Vegas, so that was okay. But I wouldn't even do that, honestly speaking. There's some devotees who live there because their jobs are there, they're forced to be there. So let them be at the temple opening. Why should I go to Las Vegas unless I have some specific service there? If I have to go there and I have a service there, I have to be the priest there, or I have to manage everything and I've been called, then okay, I go there, but not to sightsee. Because Augustine says, curiosity kills the cat. Curiosity, he says, is sinful. To be curious, let me just go to the bar, and maybe the young people here can relate with that, because I'm curious what's inside. How do people, just let me try it once, or let me watch this bad movie because I'm curious what the world is like. That curiosity will entangle us and destroy our spiritual life. Ajamil saw a lusty man and woman engaging in illicit sex. And the moment he saw it, he could have turned his face and walked the other way. But having grown up in a very pure Brahmana family, he thought, I've never known this stuff. Let me just see, what do they do? He got curious and he looked for one more minute. And that one more minute turned into a half an hour. And then he became attached to that prostitute that he saw engaging in sex life with this other man. And then he started to contemplate on it. And then he left his own wife and he married that prostitute. And then for the rest of his life, he wasn't a devotee. And by Krishna's mercy, at the end of his life, he comes back. But honestly, he got lucky. It would have probably been a few births before he came back. So he was just curious. And then he became attached to seeing that prostitute. And then he fell down. He never came back to spiritual life. So we should be afraid of this material world. We should never engage in impious, sinful activities. After coming to Krishna consciousness, we should never think that I'm strong enough that I can still, go with my old friends and, still be in that same impious, sinful atmosphere of where the four principles are being broken. If we want to enjoy, then do it piously. And if you have friends, tell them also to do it piously. Go and listen to Mozart. Listen to nice music. No problem. By controlling our will materially, we have full freedom to exercise our spirituality. So in my own personal experience, once we are in material association, since Maya is Krishna's material energy and it's more powerful than us, then we lose our freedom. When we're in that material association, we become taken away with it. We will become carried away by it. But our freedom, where is our freedom? Our freedom is choosing which association we want. That's the point until we have freedom. If I was a college student and I went and lived in the dorms, then I don't think I would have been able to keep my principles because of that age, that atmosphere. Material energy is more strong. But I have the choice to choose which association I'm in. Once I'm in the bad association, it's almost too late. Still, if we have principles and we're forced in a bad situation, we can keep it up. But if we willfully choose the bad association, it's almost too late. But our main freedom is that we can exercise is which association are we choosing? Am I going to put myself in that situation where material energy will have control over me? So karma is activity with results offered to Krishna. We're doing what we want to do, but we offer the result to Krishna. We go to a nice national park with our family and we do some kirtan there. We appreciate Krishna's material beauty, his material energy. We're offering the results of our own desires to Krishna. Akarma is done simply to please Krishna. Let's go to Vrindavan. That is akarma. Let's experience ecstatic love for Krishna. That is akarma. And vikarma is activities that just simply have to be given up. We cannot engage those in Krishna's service. We cannot engage animal slaughter in Krishna's service. We cannot engage criminal activities in Krishna's service. We cannot engage intoxication in Krishna's service. Those simply have to be given up. And then how about material welfare activities? Activities of humanitarianism, socialism, the karma activities. We must engage those in Krishna's service. Prabhupada says there's no harm, the point that I've been discussing, there's no harm in becoming a family man or an altruist, a socialist, a communist, a nationalist, or a humanitarian. Even a nationalist, there's no harm, provided that one executes his activities in relation with Ishavasya, the God-centered conception. So some of us, we even like to be altruists. We like to be a socialist. We like to be activists. It's very nice. We must execute those activities for Krishna. There's one devotee that I knew, that we all know. His name is Brahma Tirtha Prabhu, Prabhupada disciple. He lives in Alachua, Florida. And for so many years, he was a lobbyist. And he would lobby against these big companies like Walmart. So he was like a social activist, and they earned very well. Also, he was earning, because big companies or political parties, they hire you to lobby in Congress. And so one can do all these things and do them in the Ishavasya spirit, understanding the Lord as a controller and owner. And Prabhupada saying there's no harm in this, in doing activities that are pious, even if they're not the highest thing. So, mantra 3, last mantra for today. I'm just going to do 1 through 3. Asurya nama te loka andhena tamasa vritaha tangste pritya bhigachanti yeke chatma hanojana. The killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the worlds of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. Once again, the killer of the soul, whoever he may be, must enter into the planets known as the worlds of the faithless, full of darkness and ignorance. So before we speak further, we all know that the soul is eternal. So how is this verse saying the killer of the soul? This is a contradiction to begin with. Who can be a killer of the soul? The very message of the Gita, 2nd chapter, right? Krishna tells Arjuna that you can't kill these people because they are the soul. No one can kill the soul. So therefore fight, Arjuna, because do your duty. You actually won't kill them. You'll just kill their bodies. And this is the correct thing to do because they are evil. But here, mantra 3 is saying that this is the killer of the soul. Why is it saying this? It's saying this because of 2 reasons. The killer of the soul is 2 types of people. Who can say, what does the killer of the soul refer to? Anyone have?
One who wastes their
Merging into Brahman.
Merging into Brahman is one way of killing the soul. Although it doesn't die, it's a way of saying. Okay, another answer.
One who wastes their life, human form of life, just like just like Prabhupada says, like hogs and dogs, and not really trying to establish a relationship with God.
Yes, yes, very nice. Someone who ruins their spiritual life is like killing their soul by wasting this very, very rare opportunity of the human form of life. Yes, very nice. Thank you. Another answer. So the killer of the soul, particularly, these answers are right, these two that we talked about, but it particularly refers to two things. One is the killer of the soul is someone who performs suicide, because suicide is so detrimental to one's spiritual life. It's actually very sinful that a person has to, become a ghost for a few lifetimes, lose the opportunity of utilizing that rare and wonderful human life that we have in the service of the Lord by becoming so, on one side is so sad, but on the other side, that person is becoming so obsessed with something so material, something so trivial, and is then giving up the opportunity of taking that human body, which is so precious. It's the only instrument that we have to go back home, back to Godhead, and wasting that gift that Krishna has given to that person, and not reaching the ultimate goal by then killing oneself. That is called killer of the soul. So someone who performs suicide. And the second way that the killer of the soul is described is someone who is eating meat, performing sinful activities in general. That is killer of the soul, because that leads us to darkness and ignorance. So in these two ways, particularly I've heard Prabhupada mentions them in more general ways in the purport, but a person who performs suicide, who gives up his valuable human body, this rare, treasured body that can take us back home, back to Godhead. And secondly, someone who takes other people's bodies by killing them. So killing your own body or killing other people's bodies. And it goes without saying. I said, meat eating, it goes, or animal slaughter, it goes without saying that if you are killing human beings, then it's the same situation. So essentially, the killer of the soul is someone who takes a life, their life or someone else's life. Because that doesn't actually kill the soul, but it is like, it takes us on a long enough detour, or it brings a reaction big enough that it's like that. So mantra 3, it reveals the negative result of negligence of such practice. One second here. So mantra 3 reveals negative result of the negligence of such practice. Mantra 3 warns us that those who neglect these activities of the soul will enter into the worlds full of darkness and ignorance. This human body, which is attained after many lifetimes in such this human body, which is attained after many lifetimes in such lower worlds and species of life, carries the responsibility of attaining self-realization by engaging in the service of the Lord. So the killer of the soul, it means that a person who performs these activities, especially these very sinful activities, will lose the human life and will go into the animal species of life, which take literally millions of births to get back to the human form of life. One who neglects these human responsibilities of spiritual life is known as the killer of the soul and must again enter into such lower births and perpetually, again, that's used figuratively, not literally, but for a very long time, suffer in this temporary material world. So there's 8,400,000 species of life. And due to intense sinful activities, one goes into a lower species of life, maybe becomes a tiger or a lion, like we see here, and then has to take, thousands of lifetimes before they come back to the human form, which is a very, very long time. And so the Isopanisad is encouraging us. It's actually, I'm sorry about it. They are kind of very strong verses. And this is why you can see Prabhupada translated it, because you see the power of this text. It's telling us not to scare us, not to threaten us, but it's just telling us very plainly that, this will be the result. And so we should be aware of it. It's being a realist, not a pessimist. And most of us think that that is fair also. It's just that we don't think about the result. Like if someone performs a murder or many murders, we do feel that that person should get the result of it, right? They should suffer, they should be punished. But somehow we don't think that if we perform a sinful activity, nothing will happen to us. So Isopanisad is telling us this result, that we will go into the animal species of life as the reaction for those actions. And here Prabhupada talks about the suras and the asuras. This whole world has two types of people, and we have to choose who is our association, who do we want to be. Those who are cognizant of these responsibilities and who work in that spirit are called suras, godly persons. And those who are neglectful of these responsibilities or who have no information of them are called asuras or demons. So Prabhupada is saying that even ignorance is no excuse. If we have no information of these things and we're performing those activities, we will still be called asuras. Because in the cosmic sense, even that lack of information is our choice. Like I was saying, choosing our association. In our previous life, we were choosing the wrong association. Therefore, in this life, we were born with no information. But then even in this life, every street corner, every city, every town has a church, has a temple. And we have a choice to go in or go out. The human being is given all facilities for a comfortable life by the laws of nature, because the human form of life is more important and valuable than animal life. If with all these facilities, a human being does not fully utilize his life for self-realization, he must be considered Atmaha, a killer of the soul. One thing that we realize that how, especially in the United States, which most of you are from on this call, and then also India, also other places, that actually we have so many facilities. there's actually, we have Krishna somehow provided us with many facilities. And in spite of having these facilities, we don't take spiritual life seriously. We don't understand that this life is more important than animal life, and how we have so many facilities to, not only has Krishna given us the method and process to reach the highest goal, to become perfect, but we have so many facilities to reach that highest goal, yet we choose not to. I mean, he's given us the path, the best means, and also we have hours actually when we can just hear and chant, because in this country, we don't have to actually work so hard to make it. But we won't do that. I'm speaking of myself here. We'll keep engaged in material activities, more, trying to make material life more comfortable, and just be busy in those things all day. And that's very unfortunate. So here's the summary of the invocation in mantras 1 through 3. The personality of Godhead is absolutely complete and perfect. Everything and everyone is coming from him, yet he remains a complete whole. And therefore, everything is controlled and owned by him. He's the complete whole, and everything is coming from him. That's an important point. Therefore, everything is controlled and owned by him. One who understands this truth will only take what they need and use everything in Krishna's service. Knowing everything belongs to Krishna. And in this way, they live an everlasting life, unbounded by material energy. However, if one doesn't understand this truth and takes more than they need in an attempt to enjoy separately from Krishna, they lose the opportunity of this human form of life. And that's text 3, this last one. As a final point, I just want to make that this Ishavasya conception, and the conception that the Lord is the source of everything, everything comes from him, he's a complete whole, and we should accept only our quota, everything else for the service of the Lord. This conception also engenders great humility. So the Ishavasya concept is actually a conception of humility. By this method, the devotee remains humble. This is the way of practicing humility, because the Lord is a controller. Right? The Lord is in charge. I'm not really in control. Whatever happens, I have to accept as the will of the Lord. And that is part of humility, to accept things in the way that Krishna is giving them to us, or how much he's giving to us. So the principle of humility is really highlighted here. And in that consciousness of humility, then the Lord becomes revealed. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he says how it is this third verse of the Shikshashtaka, being more humble than a blade of grass and being more tolerant than a tree, that is the gateway, he says. It's the method, it's the gateway into the Leelas of Krishna. So we may think that, oh, this knowledge is all very basic. It's for, new people. And obviously I know Krishna is the controller and owner. But no, we don't, because we're not fully convinced that Krishna, everything belongs to Krishna, spiritual communism, nothing is my property. And that because we're not convinced of this, we have a sense of possessiveness and pride, then we're not being humble. We're not being completely humble. This is actually a very advanced message, even for the most advanced devotees. And once we develop that humility, then Krishna's pastimes become manifest to us. And so, Jai Shri Prabhupada, thank you very much for your kind attention. We're ending at a good time. We have some time now for questions. I know many of you have put quite a few things in the chat room, but please unmute yourself and ask questions. You can raise your hand as we always do. Pushpanjali Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Shri
Hare
Prabhupada.
Krishna.
Are you able to hear me or should I take off the headset?
I can hear you, but just maybe a little louder if you can speak a little louder.
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you so much. So Prabhuji, I have a question about the first mantra, like just taking the quota and not taking more. But how do we understand what is the mantra?
Mataji, now I'm losing you. I'm sorry. It's
Now can you hear me, Prabhuji?
no, it's not still as good.
Maybe then you can come back to me.
Okay. Indulekha Karuna Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Can you hear me?
Yes, Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam, Jai
Hare
Shri
Krishna
Krishna.
Prabhuji. Jai Srila Prabhupada, and all glories to your service, Prabhuji. All glories for this wonderful class. Very grateful. I mean, definitely it's very heavy and intense. So I just have some basic questions. The first one is, you mentioned that human beings have 4 kinds of imperfections. So by studying the transcendental knowledge and by gaining, I mean, becoming more spiritually advanced, would a person lose those 4 defects?
That's a very good question. Actually, I was going to mention it in relation to our discussion of Srila Prabhupada and his perfection, and then I forgot because we started. We talked about other things. So someone like Srila Prabhupada actually said himself that the pure devotee is not perfect like God. He's not a pure devotee. For example, if you take 100 grains of, if you take a pile of sand in your hand and you say, how many grains of sand are there? The pure devotee can't tell you. But Prabhupada says that the pure devotee is as good as God, or the spiritual master is as good as God, because Krishna tells the pure devotee what the pure devotee needs to know. Whatever the devotee needs to know for his service or to guide others, Krishna tells that pure devotee. So the pure devotee of the Lord, therefore, does not have the perfection that Krishna does, but because Krishna is directly helping them from within their heart as a super soul, then in some ways their level of acting, the things that they're doing are very perfect in nature. So to give a small example, like Prabhupada may sometimes in his classes was not able to remember a verse. It hardly ever happened. You hear so many Prabhupada's classes, he just like the Vedas are flowing through his mind. But once in a while, he could not remember a verse. So in that way, his senses were imperfect. Or he misquoted a verse, or he says a verse and says one word wrong. So in that way, he also makes a mistake. But his imperfection of senses and his mistakes are negligible because those are only details. What he is doing, what he's saying, the message that he's giving, that is perfect because that has been inspired by Krishna. But Krishna feels he doesn't need to know all the verses perfectly for the purpose that he's doing. And so therefore he doesn't give Srila Prabhupada that, you could say, talent of having a perfect memory, but he empowers Prabhupada to give whatever is needed for people to go back home, back to Godhead. He, for example, doesn't give Prabhupada magical powers because Prabhupada specifically said that I'm not bringing people to God through my magic. That is not my process. My bringing people to Krishna is through the holy name because we want to show the power of the holy name. So Prabhupada could have been a magician. He could have done mystical things and, he could have levitated like previous yogis did. But Krishna made his senses in that way imperfect where he could not levitate because that was not needed for his service. But when a disciple came and asked a question about what he should do with his life, then Prabhupada's answer was perfect because he was being inspired by Krishna to guide that disciple, and therefore the spiritual master, who was a bona fide spiritual master, will, generally speaking, give perfect advice to their disciple. So Prabhupada's perfection is in relation to the potency that Krishna gives, and therefore he is 1,000 times, million times more perfect than we are, but not in the material sense.
So that is for a perfected being, Prabhuji. But as we advance, I was just wondering if, because erroring, okay, to error is fine, but being under illusion and having the cheating propensity are two things that really don't go or align with your spiritual life. So that's
Yes.
why.
So those things, you're absolutely right. As we make advancement in spiritual life, we become more and more purified. That's where we are less in illusion. We give up the cheating propensity. We should know also that I was actually just very interesting. I was listening to a class by His Holiness Romapad Swami. He's doing this Vrindavan Yatra, which is so nice. The recordings are available. The yatra is almost over, but I really recommend it. I mean, I was thinking, oh, just be, stories about places in Vrindavan, but which is in itself amazing thing. But really, he reveals the Dhamma in his lectures. It's very very amazing, this yatra. It's available on his website. He was mentioning how the devotees of the Lord will also sometimes cheat or even be dishonest towards others. And he gave multiple examples. And he said that there's two types. The scriptures say there's two types of trickery. There's a type of trickery that's done that is evil and it has bad intention. It's done to destroy another person. And there's another type of trickery that's done for a higher purpose, to elevate another person, to help them advance. So to help a person get out of their ignorance, their suffering, the devotee might use trickery as a way of bringing them to Krishna consciousness, or just to further the movement. But it's done with a completely different state of consciousness. But yes, these four things are for the conditioned soul. Prabhupada actually, I think, mentions that these four defects are of the conditioned soul. A living being who lives in the mundane world has four defects. So the residents of the spiritual world, they don't commit mistakes. Their senses are perfect. But still, the only point I was making is still not as perfect as the Lord, perhaps, because the Lord is the Lord, and we are still living beings. But yes, Prabhupada mentions of this material world. So once we become devotees, they do go away.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I have another question. I'll wait for some other.
Okay, thank you, Mataji. Nice question, actually. Yes. Mataji, are you ready now? Pushpanji Mataji?
Yes, Prabhuji, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, again, just speak slowly and loudly. So.
Okay, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, what about people in our community? They think that only Prabhupada is the initiating guru, and that's how, I think that is the temple in Bangalore, where they say that Prabhupada is initiating and just only.
Yes.
So what is the situation of that? Who just think only Prabhupada is the only initiating guru?
Yes, and the very good question, and this is why actually we were discussing this. I mean, this is one of the reasons our discussion is relevant. And I was mentioning this statement that this devotee was saying that only Prabhupada is perfect or pure and no one else is. And why that's a flawed statement? Because that's saying that, essentially saying only Prabhupada is perfect and I'm perfect. Just listen to Prabhupada and listen to me. Are people having difficulty hearing me? Is there some background noise? No, not for me, right? It's clear? Okay. And so therefore the Ritvik philosophy, which you're referring to, this is called Ritvicism, is flawed. However, and in addition to that, the point is that this statement that I was mentioning to you, that this devotee was saying that only Prabhupada is perfect, this was being stated by a devotee who was not a Ritvik, who was an ISKCON devotee, who had a spiritual master, who was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, who was a devotee, in well-standing devotee. He even has, services in ISKCON. He was saying it. And the point is that many times, though we are not Ritviks, we come in that consciousness, or to say we have that philosophy, but we don't realize that that's an incorrect philosophy. That is many times, even in ISKCON, we're not Ritvik, but we have a Ritvik philosophy still. We're still, it's a small form, or a subtle form, or a partial form of Ritvicism. Where, okay, we get initiated, but our spiritual master is kind of just a rubber stamp. The spiritual master has given us initiation. Okay, I got initiation, but now I should take all my guidance only from Srila Prabhupada. That is a little bit of Ritvicism, where we're not understanding the relevance and importance of the pure devotees around us. And that, yes, there are other pure devotees that Prabhupada has made and this process has made, and they're not of the same stature of Srila Prabhupada, but they're also advanced devotees or pure devotees. So that's one extreme. And the other extreme is where people, they take initiation and their whole meditation is on their spiritual master, and they forget Srila Prabhupada. That also is not correct, because Prabhupada is our Acharya, and we all need to take guidance from the Acharya, which means we have to read his books, hence this Bhakti Shastri course, and not just read the books of our own spiritual master. So, because it is well established, the scriptures have told us, the devotees have told us, that Prabhupada is a Satyavesh avatar. He is a pure devotee. He is far more perfect than anyone else. And so we have to take guidance from him. But not to that extreme that we say, well, there's no one else who's pure. Who are we to say that? If our spiritual master is exhibiting the characteristics of a pure devotee, why should we just say, just because I said, Prabhupada is pure, then he's the only one who's pure? So both of those extremes are incorrect. Only following Prabhupada and not valuing the pure devotees around us is incorrect. And on the other hand, becoming so attached to our spiritual master, or say almost fanatical, and not taking guidance from Prabhupada is also incorrect, the other extreme.
Thank you for clarifying, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice question, Mataji. Thank you. Madhuri Rasa, Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
I typed in my question already. The question was, we spoke about different kinds of Atmahat, like, killing the soul. So, so there were unfortunate cases of initiated disciples committing suicide. So those are very disturbing and very, something we wouldn't want to hear, but they happening. They're still happening, and they did happen in the past. What happens to them, Prabhuji?
Yes. So very good question. And therefore, that is a sinful activity. Those devotees generally have to take a lifetime as a ghost. There's actually mention of this in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I believe the devotee's name is Govinda. I forget exactly, but I think Govinda, he's an associate of the Lord, and he performs suicide, and therefore he takes the birth as a ghost. Even in Prabhupada's pastimes, there's one devotee who did that, and they got that body. However, because they're devotees, even as a ghost and an unembodied soul, so to say, they are doing devotional service. So in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Govinda would come and sing to Lord Chaitanya. In Prabhupada's pastimes, Vishnujan Maharaj would come and sing to Prabhupada, although not visible to anyone else. So very much like Jad Bharat, they have a lifetime where they have to get the reaction, but then in their next lifetime, they come back and start from where they left. So they'll continue their devotional service after the reaction has gone. Yes, Chota Haridas, thank you. Thank you so much. I could not, yes. So Chota Haridas in Lord Chaitanya Charitamrita would sing to Lord Chaitanya. So one lifetime he had to go through that, and then they would come back and do that. Now, there's one exception to this, and that is that when a devotee knows that it's their time to leave and they fast as a way of giving up their body, that's not considered suicide. So one is that you give up your life because of some emotion and because of devastation, and you're unwilling to persevere through. And that is sinful. We have to, if it's that painful enough, then we will die naturally. That pain will take our life. Like in the case of Dashrath Maharaj, out of separation from Lord Ram, he had to give up his life. But it's not our job to give up our life. So when a devotee does it out of a misunderstanding or out of simply weakness of heart, out of emotion, then that leads to that reaction. On the other hand, there are cases that look like suicide, but they're not suicide, which means a devotee knows that they have to give up their life and they fast. Prabhupada did this. Towards the end, he felt Krishna was calling him back. His mission was done, and he started fasting. And then the devotees begged him and said that, no, Prabhupada, please stay. And then Prabhupada told them, you pray to Krishna. And if Krishna allows me to stay longer, then I'll stop fasting and I'll start eating again. And so the devotees, they started praying, and in every temple around America, they're making prayers to the Lord that, my dear Lord, please let Srila Prabhupada stay with us more if you so desire. And after a week, this is in the Lilamrit, Prabhupada announces that he's going to start eating again. And he starts eating again. And he says that Krishna said, I can stay for a bit longer. And then, but it was the end of, it was coming to the close of his pastimes. So then after a month, then Prabhupada started fasting again. And then he disappeared. So Prabhupada very much showed that, his pastimes were coming to an end. He stayed for another month for his disciples so that everyone could come and see him, whoever wanted to come and see him, and gain final instructions from their spiritual master. And then once he had done that, then he left. So that is called knowing when you go and giving up your life according to that. That's a different situation.
Yes, it's right. We also see that mood in some of the acharyas, at that time when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left, and then Rupa Goswami left.
Raghunath Das Goswami, yes.
Yes.
And that's actually a third case. That third case that's an expression of ecstatic love on the level of prema. So that's not relevant to us. That is like, Srimati Radharani, she wants to give up her life, but she cannot. Raghunath Das Goswami is saying, I'm going to smash my head on the rock because of this separation. These are completely different. Like, these are part of Krishna's Leela. The devotee is expressing their intense separation. And the fact is, although they express it in that way, it never really happens. Raghunath Das Goswami never gives up his life. So when it's on that level, Srimati Radharani never never gives up her life. She stays on for the happiness of Krishna. So on that level, there's sometimes expressions like that, but the reality is that they never follow through for this very simple principle.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Thank you, Brother. Hare Krishna.
Nice discussion, Mataji. That was a good point that you brought up. Brandy Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Dhanva Pranam Prabhuji. I actually had the same question as Mataji, so I'm really glad that I could follow up from her, because it gave me an opportunity to ask another question that I've really wanted to understand. My godfather committed suicide, and he wasn't, I think, particularly a very godly man, but nonetheless, he was a very good man. He took very good care of me when I was younger. And I found him, so it was in a life event for me. But I've always wanted to understand what happened to him, because I didn't feel like it was the end of him, if that makes sense, even before I had the spiritual knowledge. And I asked your mother one time, I said, well, what happens to people who commit suicide? And she said, they become a ghost. Everybody knows that. And I said, well, I didn't, so thank you. But you said they take one lifetime as a ghost. What marks the end of that life as a ghost? What makes them fulfill that life? What is the cutoff?
That's a great question, because a ghost doesn't have a physical body. So like, when does that body die, right?
What comes next? What do they do?
So the thing is that actually the reason why a ghost, the reason is because Krishna gave us a physical body and we didn't appreciate it. We essentially neglected it. And so therefore then we have to have a lifetime in which we have desires, we have a soul, but we don't have a body, because we disrespected that which Krishna gave. Now the reaction is we don't get that for a lifetime. And being a ghost is a very painful situation. Why? It's not fun, so, well, you can just float around and sing songs. Well, what's wrong with it? No, it's a painful situation because we have the desires, but we have no way of fulfilling them. And this is why ghosts try to inhabit other people's bodies, because then they're trying to fulfill those desires through the body of someone else. This is why it's the thing of haunted by ghosts. Why are ghosts taking other people's bodies? Because they do what they want to do through another set of arms and legs. And so my guess would be, just logically using Anuman here and not Shabda, is that we would become a ghost for the time period that we didn't utilize our physical body, because that's the reaction. So I was meant to have a lifetime of 100 years. I cut it short to 20. So for 80 years, I have to be a ghost. I have to, but again, it's if your godfather was a very pious person, very devotional person, Krishna may reduce it, say only a few years. And as in that ghost, even as a ghost, when we have the opportunity to associate with the devotee, when we have the opportunity to hear the holy name. Only once in my life, I had a distinct experience of being attacked by a ghost. And this was in an ashram, actually. And I won't mention the place. I don't just want to mention the place, but it's a temple, very nice temple, and it's an ashram. I was staying in the guest house. And the next day I went to the devotees and I said, I experienced something last night. And they said, oh, yes. Before the devotees owned this guest house, it's well known that a murder happened in that apartment. And ever since that time, there's been a ghost there. And that's why we made it into the guest room, because no one wants to come here. Like, oh, thank you very much. So when this ghost came to me, I felt that my whole body, I couldn't move it. And I was wide awake. And I wasn't sick at all. I was a young, healthy boy, and I couldn't move. And then I started chanting Nrsimha prayers, but the ghost wouldn't go away. And so, but I was chanting the Nrsimha prayers, it wouldn't go away. And then I started chanting the name of Lord Nityananda. And when I would chant, the ghost would go away. I had this distinct experience. I would move my arms, I'd be fine. And I thought, okay, then I would stop chanting. And the moment I'd stop, the ghost would come right back. And like this went on. I would chant Nityananda, his ghost would go away, and I would stop because I think, okay, now it's fine. I can, things are back to normal, it's gone away. But then I stopped, it'd come back. And so then I chanted Nityananda for like an hour or 2 hours through the night. And then finally, it just went away. So the point is that ghost was hearing the holy name. That's why it was going away. It was hearing the holy name, which was kind of pushing it away. But that means it was getting spiritual benefit. So there's also spiritually lucky ghosts that may come in contact with devotees and hear the holy name.
I think that after becoming a devotee, I think that Krishna did take some special mercy on him, because my godfather's house was only 3 doors down from mine, and next door to his on the other end is a church. It's a Baptist church. And Pastor John, we've known him forever. My godfather gave my mother and I his house with everything. And Pastor John discussed with us about buying the house and turning it into a place for children to come and stay, like for the church. And it's a place to utilize in God's service. And it might not be directly Krishna in that sense of worship, but I think that, you know, it was hard to see they totally tore down his house. It was hard to see his house be torn down, but I felt like there was some kind of release and closure there. And it was mercy, and it was a lot of reflection for me after processing things as a devotee. I just wanted to give one other note on the note of spiritual communism. A lot of people today are interested in like new age religion and practices like that. And minimalism is a huge part of that. And I find it interesting how a lot of people are understanding that they're not satisfied, but they may not have the intelligent understanding of precisely why it's not fulfilling, but at least they're renouncing in some ways and bringing in those practices that can help gradually elevate them. And I find it interesting because it's typically the same people who are interested in like chakras and practices like that. And so, you know, they might not be precisely understanding why yet, but it's all progress. I was interested in that before I understood the purpose of why through Krishna consciousness. So I just wanted to share that, but thank you for answering that question.
Yes, thank you, Brandy, for that comment, because I actually forgot to mention that point, that accepting our quota first and foremost means not performing any sinful activities, because as we were discussing, sin by definition means accepting more than our quota, like in the case of meat eating, illicit sex, etc. But then once we are not performing sinful activities, then devotees themselves have their own understandings of what their quota is. And so devotees ask, well, then what is my quota? How do I know too much is too much? You know, how do I know, how much I should spend for myself? And that's something that we get guidance from the spiritual master, from sadhu sangha, essentially devotees, from our own heart and our own level of renunciation. So for like Raghunath Das Goswami, his quota was not even begging. He thought begging was too lavish. Getting good food by going door to door and asking for food was too lavish. His quota became taking essentially the food that was thrown out and was washed over on the street. Now, is that our quota? Since you're speaking about minimalism, is that our quota? Maybe or maybe not. Essentially, our quota is something that we need, that we feel that if I have this minimum, I can practice my spiritual life nicely. Because if we have too less, we won't be able to practice spiritually. But if I have this, I can then practice spiritually. But if I have more than this, it'll be a distraction, because I'll spend time trying to maintain this and I'll have less time for my spiritual life. And this is actually something I've been meditating upon recently a lot, that, you know, reducing needs, reducing possessions, and simplifying life so that we have less so we can do more.
Even when you are renouncing, though, it's still not as fulfilling without knowing the higher purpose of what you're sacrificing it to. So that's the beauty of serving Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, I agree. Thank you. Thank you so much. Param Karuna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Danvat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Jai Shri. Thank you for such a wonderful class, Prabhuji. Very, very deep points, I realized. Just to kind of end the discussion on suicide was very enlightening. One thing I really learned today was when you mentioned about the fact that one cuts short his life which he could have used in Krishna's service. And that's a very profound point. And the question I had was in relation to that, sort of like a corner case question, but somebody asked me this question and I've been thinking about, or at least at the back of my mind, it has been there, and I thought I'll bring this up to you and get some enlightenment or education. Is that if somebody is really suffering from a very a terminal disease, and knows that their life is at an end, not a devotee, and just in a normal case, and wants to legally end their life, to not go through the unbearable pain. And they know that the point I'm trying to connect to is that they know, or even if they're a devotee, they know that the rest of their life can't really be used in Krishna's service, in that sense that the pain is so much that it can't meaningfully be used for hearing or chanting. Well, what guidance would you provide? Is that okay, or is it the quota of the suffering that one must suffer and not try to short circuit that? Would that be the understanding, or what understanding would you provide?
It's a very nice, Prabhu, it's a very nice issue that you raise, and a difficult one, actually, because we have these situations in our spiritual life that are not cut and dry, and your example is very, very telling. So regarding two things actually come to my mind, and it's interesting also you asked this question because right now I'm teaching a course. It was the first time in my life. It's not really my area, but I'm teaching a course in medical ethics. So this is like forefront, and there's so much discussion on it, and really a spiritual perspective is the only way to answer these things. And so it's devotees are the ones who actually should have the answers. So one thing is that in modern medicine, a lot of the terminally ill patients are living because they're extending their lives artificially, right? They're on a ventilator, or they have a heart thing in, or something like this. Suicide doesn't mean not accepting those things. So a person is not obliged, first and foremost, to accept things that artificially extend their life so they live like a vegetable. In other words, we have the right to naturally live our life in the way that Krishna made it, which means a devotee or even a non-devotee can say no, that, look, I don't want to live in this vegetable state, so I don't want to be on a machine or artificially kept alive. So that's one thing. But then there's other cases which you're saying where people can continue living in pain without being artificially kept alive. Right? There's certain diseases that are very painful and you just don't die, just a pain that you live with, and you can continue living. So in such situations, we do find examples of devotees, pious people, advanced people, where they know they're sort of on the brink of death, but painful life, they may live another 5 years, and so they may voluntarily choose to fast. And in my mind, that's not suicide, because such a person, it's not like they're saying, my wife left me, so now I'm going to jump off a bridge, or my husband left me and did that. It's not a result of anger. It's not a result it's a result of the realization that in my current state, I can't do anything. I can't even do spiritual life. So better, like Kula Shekhar Maharaj said, let me focus my mind on the Lord now that I can do it, and in a very Krishna conscious way, give up my life through some austerities, because of the immediate fact that I'm basically dead. I am basically dead. It's just like my body's not functioning. It's not due to anger or that thing. It's just my body's not there. So I don't think that is suicide, and that's why it's okay. But there's always, it depends, right? It depends. There's always gray lines. How bad is the disease? How great is the pain? I would definitely encourage everyone to err on the side of keeping their life, because as long as you live, there's hope, and you can perform devotional service, even if that's just chanting in your mind or just reading. Mother Kunti, this disciple of Srila Prabhupada, she had stage 4 cancer. And until the very end, she would just lie in her bed. She had her database, her computer, and she would just read Bhagavatam, and she loved it. She was reading all day, completely absorbed, in stage 4 cancer. And she was so transcendental that she was not even taking morphine. She was not taking the pain medicine, which the doctors started to think that what's happening. Like, she became a case study for them. How is this lady in stage 4 cancer and not taking even morphine? And she's not feeling the pain. And it became such a sensation that the local channel in Boise, Idaho, where we lived, they came and they did a story on her. And they said, how is it that you're transcending the pain of cancer? And she started to preach. This was her final preaching program before she left her body. On television, she started to preach that, you can transcend the body. We're the soul. And, if we read these books, if we chant, we can become self-realized. She was living the talk. I mean, she was just amazing. And she was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, a perfect example of someone who had transcended their body at the time of their death. She then left her body in New Vrindavan. Devotees were holding her hand and chanting when she left her body. Complete success story. And she had cancer, and she could have given up her body beforehand, but she didn't. She just kept on doing devotional service until she naturally passed away. So definitely we should err on the side of keeping our life as long as we can and trying to tolerate the pain, which Mother Kunti did by transcending it, absorbing ourselves in Krishna's service. That's the correct way of doing it. At the same time, once in a while, we find examples of when, it becomes very, a person cannot even eat and drink. The devotee, or there's some huge problem. The devotee knows I'm about to die, starts fasting, and gives up his body while fixing his mind on Krishna, which is a very different scenario than an anger-filled suicide. Yes,
thank you. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for wonderful clarification.
Yes, thank you. And many devotees also, they don't accept this life support. They'll say, no, I don't want to, because they don't want to extend it. And Mother Kunti was like that also. She had cancer, and she voluntarily chose not to go for regular medicine. Like, she didn't go for chemotherapy and things. So if we're on that level of realization, we may be detached enough where we're happy to go. So we are not doing the extraneous medical treatment, not because she didn't have faith in it. I mean, she did lose the battle by the natural medication, which she almost easily could have cured herself, because it just started off as breast cancer, is very localized. She could have cured herself if she went for modern medicine. But the point is, on that level of realization, the devotee is very happy to go back home, back to Godhead. So they're like, well, if Krishna gave me cancer, chemotherapy is almost worse than the cancer itself. People say that. So there's like, well, I don't want to go through that pain of trying to do this. I'll just leave it in Krishna's hands. And so she said, well, if I get cured, I get cured, I'll stay. If I don't, then I'm happy to leave this body.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Kokila Mataji, and we'll make this the last question, just because I need to leave a little early today. I apologize.
Hare Krishna, Dandat Pranam, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for such an Nectarian session, Prabhuji, as always. And the discussion was very nice, and quite a few doubts were cleared by other questions. So, but I have a question, like while we were discussing about a devotee saying that Prabhupada was the epitome of the perfection and others are not. So, so Prabhuji, like you were discussing about the subtle ego. So how we are going to take care, because subtle ego, as it says, it's a subtle, so it's highly impossible for us to see for ourselves at times. So how we are going to take care of that subtle ego, and how we are going to judge that are we falling in that trap or not? So that's my question. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
So the trap, your question is the trap of the subtle ego. meaning that I can understand Prabhupada perfectly
Yes.
and others cannot. Well, first of all, by just understanding that doesn't make sense. That viewpoint doesn't make sense because Srila Prabhupada in different places says things that are different instructions to different disciples. So we have, we have to keep that into account. That to understand the spiritual master is not an easy thing, and even to understand Prabhupada's words, we need guidance, and we need the sadhu sangha, we need the association of devotees, because this is why you find in the Upanishads that a student would come to the guru and say, I have this question, please answer it. And the guru would say, go back and perform austerities for 1,000 years and then come back. And then you'll be able to understand. So someone will say, well, if the question is there, why can he not just answer it? The answer is there, and the answer will be clear. But only when our heart is purified can we actually understand spiritual life. That is a key point. The understanding is partly through the purification. So the spiritual master may say something, but if our heart is not purified, we won't actually understand it, or it'll take time for us to understand it. And that's our job. That's our part. Spiritual master's part is giving us the knowledge. Our part is purification of the heart. So if our heart is not so purified, then we have to take help of the devotees whose heart is purified to explain that to us. Otherwise, that knowledge may not get revealed to us. We may get a misunderstanding. So this is one way that we can get rid of the subtle false ego, is by performing the process of bhakti to purify our existence. And then things become more clear. To advanced devotees, they struggle less because things are more clear. Why? Because they're working hard in their spiritual life. They're working to purify the heart. So that when the heart is purified, it's like a mirror. It reflects things very clearly. And then number one, we purify our heart. Number two, we also have to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So we have the Guru, Prabhupada, we have the Shastra, scriptures, and then we have the community of sadhus. We have to take their help to figure out who are pure devotees and who are not. We can't know, so we use the help of the community of devotees, because the group of sadhus, they can tell us through their experience and through their common experience that this is a genuine sadhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, and I'm so sorry I just held you so much back, and you have to leave. So thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
Thank you. No, thank you for all your wonderful questions. It's the highlight of my week to be part of this wonderful class, this wonderful discussion on the scriptures. Actually, it's a fact. It's so nice, this Bhakti Shastri, and I hope and pray that every single one of you, after completing your Bhakti Shastri, will eternally continue teaching this Bhakti Shastri. Because every week when we remember these topics, then we remind ourselves, oh my gosh, yes, I forgot this. I need to do this more. I need to do this more. So I hope and pray that each one of you will become teachers, and in your own communities will become Bhakti Shastri teachers and teach students, and teach even one person or even hundreds of people, however it is. But all of us need to share this. And truly, a few of you mentioned that the classes are so nice. Truly, it's not the classes. It is the book itself, the Isopanisad, and Prabhupada's mercy, and the mercy of all of the devotees. That is all of you. That this is so interesting. And the mercy of Mother Urmila. Her slides are very nice, and I'm very grateful to her. She has really helped us access this spiritual knowledge. So thank you. Hare Krishna. Thanks. Most likely we will have class next week. If there's a change, I'll let you know, but I like to keep up the momentum. And if you can't, if you're traveling, you can listen to the recording or just join for an hour at least. So we'll try to have class next week. I'll try my best. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you, Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam, some wonderful.
Hare Krishna
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.
Thank you so much.